You're listening to Tomb Raiders, a gem of a podcast. We talk about art, creativity, entertainment, and many other topics. Hosted by Mike Lopez and Lalo Guerra.
You're only as good as your last film. You're only as good as your last project. So we have to do that again and again. Finding really great talent and also having an environment to retain them. We've always had an incredible depth of talent out of our Dallas studio. But as we grew, we knew that we needed to expand our talent base and expand that from a worldwide audience.
Here are the nominees for Best Animated Short Film. Dimanche Sunday, Patrick Doyon. The Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lesmore, William Joyce and Brandon Oldenburg. La Luna, Enrico Casarosa. A Morning Stroll, Grant Orchard and Sue Goff. Wildlife, Amanda Forbes and Wendy Tilby.
And the Oscar goes to Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lesmore, William Joyce and Brandon Oldenburg.
When asked what the biggest challenge was in making this film, William Joyce says, not giving up. They did 375 setups in 5 days. It nearly killed them all. And still, it was the most fun they've ever had.
It's been a part of our DNA ever since we were children, and it's made us storytellers. Thank you, our wives.
Oh, God.
Thank you, our families.
Especially my kids.
The Academy.
And for all of us within the company, I think it's fair to say we all love sci-fi.
I think that the mixture of pushing technology through creative ideas is a big part of why Flight School exists.
The job that we have created for ourselves here at Flight School is basically to be futurists. Half of the team are scientists, and the other half are storytellers.
I wanted to work at Flight School to grow as an artist and a technician, to push how we use 360 to tell stories.
We look at gameplay abstractly. We're always thinking of new ways that the mediums themselves can be innovative.
There are associations with content that people have that I feel like we can break down the definitions of.
We're all about what's next. We're all about what's not there yet. We start projects where the hardware that we're delivering on isn't created yet.
Welcome everybody to this new episode of Tomb Raiders podcast. First of all, I'm just gonna introduce our first gem. His name is Chuck Peil. How are you, Chuck?
Hey, Mike. Hey, Lalo. How you doing?
Excellent. So I'm just gonna talk real quick about Chuck. So Chuck is the Executive Vice President and Strategic Partnerships from Real Effects, working for more than 20 years in this company. And as founding member and head of business development strategic partnerships with Real Effects, Chuck has participated in the steady growth of the studio from its inception. The Real Effects studios are located in Dallas, Texas, Hollywood, and Montreal. By the way, Montreal is beautiful. And have multiple films in various stages of development. He is an executive producer of the animated movie The Book of Life, among others. Thank you so much, Chuck, and welcome.
Thanks so much. Really happy to be here.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, our second guest, Brandon Oldenburg. Mr. Brandon, how are you, my friend?
Hey guys, thanks for having us. Feel fantastic.
¿Cómo estás, mi amigo? Excellent.
Good. Thank you for having
Excellent,
us.
Man. So Brandon Oldenburg is an Academy Award-winning film director, designer, and immersive storyteller. Beside the Oscars, Brandon has received 4 Emmys, multiple Gold Lions at Cannes, including the Grand Prix, and host of the other industry accolades. As Chief Creative Officer of Flight School Studio, Brandon leads the team of creative directors and artists who produce innovative stories with new technologies. And prior to Flight School, Brandon co-founded Real Effects and Moonbot Studios, both leaders in animation and emerging technology. It's really an honor to have you both in this space, and just tell us about you.
Thank you for having us.
This is amazing.
So
Chuck and I have both been talking about wanting to share stories about the past and basically the past 27 plus years of working together and the journey we've been on. We keep telling ourselves for at least a decade that we need to like start documenting and sharing a little bit more about our history, since it's pretty much hasn't been heard. And so this is maybe the starting point for us to document and share with the world. Thank you for giving us this platform to start to give a little bit more background about how the companies have all formed and how we've enjoyed working together and being best friends for all these years.
Great.
For me, it's where do you start, really? There's so much. You know, one of the things that whenever we talk about our journey, you know, you hear a lot of people talk about their journeys, and often it's the great things, you know, all the successful things that they highlight. But honestly, I think that the real interesting stories are the hard ones.
It's boring.
Those are the weeks hey, it's a pretty good week. We can have top ramen noodles and maybe a little chicken on the side, you know, for dinner, or you know, the tough times. But I think, you know, that's the you know, as Brandon, you said earlier, that's the authentic journey. And it doesn't. And even 27 years later, you have your ups and downs. But I think those are the things that are important in how we started our company. So, I mean, Brandon, you were in you started just before I did as it got going. So maybe, you know, in the early days, it was just 4, right? Yeah.
Right. So, you know, I went to art school in the early 90s to pave a way for an illustration career, doing freelance illustration. And then I had a love for filmmaking too, and had been doing that all through my grade school and high school years with, you know, stop motion with our G.I. Joes or making little movies with my friends. But eventually, I had a love for drawing, and that's what led me to going to art school. But coming out of art school, I reconnected with some friends who I had art class with in high school, and they had started a company called Real Effects, doing, you know, visual effects for commercial work. Dieste, Mike, you worked for them. They were one of the clients, and so coming on board with them very early on, you know, I shared over that first lunch where we were reconnecting, and I said, well, have you guys considered, you know, making animated movies? I think we could do that. We could create a company to make animated feature films. And that became our Mount Everest for the studio. And it took a long time to finally get there, but now looking back over all these years, you know, the company has made over 8 animated feature films. A lot of them work for hire, but, you know, some of them original, Book of Life being one of those. And so, you know, I'm super proud of seeing the company achieve its goals and then also being able to reboot itself and establish new goals. It says a lot to be a company that is still around after 25 plus years. You know, we looked at companies we aspired to be like, for example, like Rhythm and Hughes, and it's crazy to think they're no longer around. And so it says something to be an American-based studio and to not be on the West or East Coast and to still be in existence. That really does say something, and it's a testament, I think, to the hard work that Chuck has put into the company every day to keep the doors open, as well as, you know, the 400 plus employees that do a lot of hard work too to keep the doors open.
You know what, I'll never forget kind of a funny story. My path to this business was pretty crooked. You know, I was in the fast food business first, coming out of college, and I'll keep the story short. But I just was, we were putting in 18-hour days, putting in several Arby's restaurants. And, it was an okay business, but it was just a grind. But I was hollow. There was something missing in that. And so I was working with my business partner at the time, and I wanted to come out with a plan where we gave each of the store managers a little percentage, like a stake in the shop. And he thought that was the the most ignorant idea at all. He said, I'd never do that. He had his master's. He was very business oriented. And I looked at him and said, if you're paying people barely anything, first of all, and you're not giving them incentive, this is a house of cards. So I was kind of disillusioned. That weekend, we went up to Toronto and for a fast food convention. That's a fun time, a bunch of fast food people. And in the middle of the square in Toronto, there was this beautiful big tent that was blue and yellow, and it had a little circus wagon out front, and it said Cirque du Soleil. Now, Cirque du Soleil, this was not like, it was just Cirque du Soleil. This is after Guy, the guy who founded it, had taken all of his incredible performers and banded them together and said, hey, let's create a story and put it into a tent. So I didn't know what it was. It was $10. We went, got tickets, and for me, this was that moment where I call it a lightning strike, where I just got hit by lightning, and all the cells in my body I could feel them change. I still have goosebumps about it because I got emotional. I couldn't talk. Everything about that experience coming out of there was so amazing. And I looked at my partner. I said, what did you think, Raymond? And he thought it was a ripoff, and he would never do it again. So that was my moment. And I said to myself, I don't know what that is, but I want to go do that. And so I bought the 8-track tape and the Betamax or whatever was available. This is years ago. And all I know is that this thing was in French. And I knew the whole story. And so sometimes, for me, the lesson was, I got to go find that. And once you tune into the frequency, that's kind of what I did. It was like, hey, I got a yellow Volkswagen. And when you get your yellow Volkswagen, you think you start seeing them all the time. All of a sudden, other yellow Volkswagens show up. No, it's just because you started to tune into it. And when I did, I kind of got connected, found some creative people, and it was a studio designer by the name of Russ Berger, and said, there's this group, Brandon and the team, that are doing something, and you should meet them. And when we met, we all connected and said, I'm in. And then, wow. The four amigos went off, and, so I envy the path of somebody that knows the art. But for me, I'm an artist, and my art comes in appreciating incredible artists. That's kind of so that's how I got in it,
Absolutely. Chuck is the champion for all artists, and he's also very creative, not only with, aesthetics and storytelling. He's very creative when it comes to how we navigated the world of, breaking into the industry, and being creative with how we presented ourselves to get a chance and get an opportunity to actually compete on a national, international scale. That was the most difficult thing, is being in a place in the world where entertainment is not normally birthed out of, and then to be able to get the attention of those who make decisions and help, distribute entertainment. That was one of the biggest challenges, is just finding windows of opportunity and busting through them. And Chuck is a master at maintaining relationships and creating relationships and finding those opportunities that led us to the next level, into
I also think
where we are now.
That at the end of the day, you're only as good as what you represent, right? So, I'll never forget this is a funny story. Actually, it ties to Dieste. It ties to Jesse Diaz, of all people. Is it okay to say that?
Oh, okay.
So
yes.
So I had this from Dieste.
Jesse,
so we had this big
Dieste.
Maybe I think that this was still. Maybe he was still at Barry Brown's agency, the Hispanic agency. Grupo Cuatro.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyways, they had the Gatorade account. You know, up to that time, we had done like local television commercials for like, you know, a mechanic shop or something. You know, so we were just barely making it. So we had this opportunity to do a Gatorade spot. I'd never been in a meeting with Brandon before, so I dress up all fancy. I don't do that anymore, and so I had my little double-breasted suit on, and I was trying to be cool, and I knew this was a big chance. So Maribel and Jesse come over, and we started talking, and Brandon pulls this clipboard out, and he's over there. I think he's writing stuff or just doodling, and I'm trying to engage with the clients, asking them questions, and I was getting irritated. I was like, God dang it, you know, like at least look at them. Like I was, and finally I said, Brandon, do you have anything to say? and he's sitting there like this, and he takes his clipboard, he turns it around, and he goes, well, I kind of sketched out the spot for you, and he'd done storyboards.
Oh wow!
And in that moment, it was like, and we got the gig just based upon that. And for me, the learning moment was, for a person like me, you just wind a creative person up, point them in the right direction, and get out of the way. And when you do that, magic happens, right? And you're there to help set the boundaries. But I don't know if you remember that, Brandon, but that was such a funny day. I was like, the clipboard. You probably still have that clipboard somewhere.
No, coming right out of art school, I was very shy and very quiet. I learned actually how to talk and present myself by observing Chuck and his charisma. It certainly can never be achieved by any other mortal human, but Chuck has a certain level of charisma that I think we can all aspire to.
That's for us. That's where he and I connected. And actually, what was fun was we started coming out to Los Angeles right out of the gate because Brandon had this vision. Everybody bought into Brandon's vision, which was slightly delusional, which was, let's go make animated movies. There wasn't any other. There's gaming, and so we started grinding, and we take these trips, the cheapest trip we could. Like we had to connect the flight 3 times, and stay at a Motel 6, and so many funny stories in those early days. But we'd grind 7 or 8 meetings a day, and not, I'd say 80% of them nothing came out of it, but. It started. We just kept persistent, So.
Yeah, it's all about persistence. It's all about seeing an opportunity in even the most sort of menial of jobs. But you go, oh, wait, you know what? That opportunity through that spot or that job will be a great calling card to open the next door to get us one step closer to a longer form piece of entertainment. So you just always have to find, if you're a creative person, you will have to be creative when you look at things. You have to envision where it will take you and the opportunities that it may present to you. And so there's never really a job that you shouldn't take, in the sense that if you can see a stepping stone to your bigger goals, even though it may be a tiny stepping stone, it's worth taking because it will lead to a relationship. It will lead to a window of being able to have a conversation with somebody about what you do. And most importantly, if you just stay the course and you do great work, inevitably people will notice.
Exactly.
And I believe it was on a commercial we did, a Texas lottery commercial that we were doing, where we were animating coins. And it was a scratch-off commercial, and these coins, we came up with very dynamic storyboards and an approach that hadn't been seen before in a commercial, where it was like a Busby Berkeley musical, where all these coins are jumping into a fountain, and it was synchronized swimming, and it had water effects. It was very elaborate for a Texas lottery commercial. But we were able to have a set designer that did the fountain and all the foliage around it that had just come off of a Robert Rodriguez film, Spy Kids. And she was observing us, and she was like, hey, you remind us of this guy that we work with. And I said, I know who you're talking about. I've read his book. She's like, yeah, I just finished Spy Kids, and we're talking about doing a second film. I think you guys should meet because he would probably really like working with you. And sure enough, that led to an opportunity for us to have a small window to present ourselves. And we had many months to prepare. Right. And so Chuck and I went back to the drawing board and said, okay, how are we going to make an impression on Robert Rodriguez? How can we make him undeniably want to work with us? And so we had seen Spy Kids, and so we made a spy kit for him. We put in a mini DVD player and a cell phone. It had a special video that played. It came with a cryptic message in the box that said, press play. That was it. And then at the end of the video, it said, press send on the phone, which then would call Chuck's cell phone.
Oh, wow. Very
and
clever.
Then we would start to engage in a conversation. So we prepared all of this. Now, sounds cool, but it completely failed on delivery. We intended to have it just sort of sitting on his desk through our relationship with the production designer. But when we got to Austin with this box on the one day that he may be in the office, we literally are getting out of the car when this rusty old truck pops up, his dog jumps out of the back, and there's Robert Rodriguez looking at us like, why are you out in the middle of nowhere at this warehouse? Who are you guys? And we're like, and we had this scary looking black case that looks like it could have a bomb in it or something. And he's like, what do you got there? And I'm like, well, okay, you weren't supposed to get this way, but here you go. And then he was intrigued. Wow. And then he ended up opening the box in our presence in his office. And he still pretended we weren't there. He watched the video. He called the cell phone. But it did seem like, okay, great, we're gonna work together. But at the end of that meeting, weeks and months went by, nothing happened. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, one morning, we get a phone call. Hey, can you come to Six Flags? Robert Rodriguez is shooting a movie, and he would love to see if you can help him on this series of shots. And so we show up to set with no idea what we're doing. And then the next thing we know is that we're doing the first 15 minutes for Spy Kids 2, and Bill Paxton is there looking over my shoulder while I'm sketching what these amusement park rides need to look like. The Vomiter, the Whippersnapper, all of these rides that Robert was basically, I don't know what to do here. We want a ride that's going to be right here, and it does this thing. Go. And the VFX supervisor from Canada was like, he was like overwhelmed. He's just like, you take all of this. I don't want any of this. And that was, again, like we were crazy enough to think we could do that, first off. Yeah. We didn't have the pipeline in place to turn around those shots in that way. But we figured it out. It's about getting the opportunity and then, holy crap, figuring out what to do now.
Wow. And one thing that came out of that is we use a term called sizzle. Because, like fajitas or a steak, when the steak comes out, somehow it tastes a lot better if there's a little sizzle. And the idea of just doing the spy kit and delivering it to him, that became the start of many other things. That's how we do everything. We still to this day, we'll use the word, hey, what kind of sizzler are we going to do? Why? We're not trying to buy the business. We're not trying, but what we're trying to show is enthusiasm and creativity. We're in entertainment, right? So if we're going to bid on a project, or if we're trying to get something, we always come up with these really crazy, weird, and fun things that are always received with such enthusiasm. Whether or not we get it, they go, "Dang, I want to work with you guys because the passion you put in that, I know will end up on the screen." And the funny thing is, Brandon was sketching stuff that day, and at one moment we're looking at each other and we said, "Are we hired?" Or like, "I guess we're working."
For every 10 amazing Spy Kit boxes or whatever it is that we make, only one of those actually turns into a real job. But you can't lose that sort of childlike wonder and excitement about potential. And Chuck could probably tell us a story about when he dressed up as Santa Claus.
Cool. I want to hear that.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I don't want to chew up all the time, but so there was this project we were developing called Ornaments, and it's a story of Christmas ornaments on a tree that have kind of an East Side, West Side vibe to it, meaning the handmaids versus the store-boughts, right? And it's all about every year coming out of the box and being placed on the tree. So we had an opportunity with a company called Artisan Entertainment, which was pretty big at the time. This is years ago. And so we had a meeting with an executive, in New York City. So we're like, damn, this is amazing.
Cool.
This is amazing. Okay, so what are we going to do? What's the sizzle? So we put together a basket. We had handmade cookies made in the ornaments, everything. And I thought, okay, we're going to send this. We're going to deliver this, but we got to have Santa Claus deliver it to him. So I arranged for. There's a company that rents out nothing but Santa suits. That's what they do. So I arranged for it to be delivered to the hotel. I was 2 blocks from Artisan Entertainment, right near Radio City Music Hall, right in the middle of everything. So the day of the meeting was happening at 2:00. I wanted Santa to go up there around 11 o'clock, deliver the package, and disappear. But the guy calls me, and he can't play Santa. So I'm like, what am I going to do? Well, I guess I have to be Santa. So I grabbed the suit, grabbed a pillow, grabbed the basket, walked to Artisan Entertainment. This is before 9/11, so the security was not as crazy as it was post 9/11. But the security people are looking at me, going, "Excuse me, how can I help you?" So I'm looking for Peter Von Gaal at Artisan Entertainment. Oh, they're on the 21st floor. So I get in the elevator, have the Santa suit, have these ornament cookies. People are looking, New Yorkers. And I get up to the floor, but I'm looking for a restroom. But I'm like too busy. It's the main area. So I went up one more floor, and that was too busy. But finally I found kind of an empty floor. I get off, and the bathrooms are locked. I'm like, damn it. So I opened the emergency door that goes down the staircases, and I'm like, hey, this is perfect. I'll just get dressed in the staircase, walk down. So I put my Santa suit on. I took a couple selfies, and get down to the floor, and the door's locked. So I'm panicking. Then the next one, panicking. So finally I hear a voice, and I'm knocking, and this guy opens the door slowly. He goes, "Are you delivering a package? If you're delivering a package, you know that you have to go through the back entrance." And he was disciplining me. And I said, no, it's not that. Listen, I'm delivering this package. I'm from Dallas. I'm stuck in here. Could you just...
I'm from the North Pole.
And it took me a few minutes to... Yeah, I'm from the North Pole. And so he opens the door. That was the scariest thing.
How dare you talk to Santa this way?
Yeah, don't you talk... Boy, you're on my naughty list. Yeah. You're getting a lump of coal. He finally lets me in, and he goes, I could lose my job for this. I said, I really appreciate it. I promise I'll just do my thing, and I'll go. So I break into my ho-ho-ho performance and come to the front desk, and the receptionist's like, well, hello, Santa.
Okay.
Who are you looking for today? She goes, I've got a couple of things for my kids I want. And I said, I'm looking for Peter. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry, he just went to the restroom or he's gone. And I'm like, oh, damn. But just before I was going to turn around all defeated, here he comes. And this guy was so nice, and he grabbed me as Santa. I gave him the basket, and I told him the line was, Peter, you've got to help save Christmas. And he's like, all right, Santa. And then I disappear, and I'm waving. Well, I hear the guy going, psst, you have to come this way. It was the guy that let me in. As I'm coming, he has the elevator, the freight elevator coming up. I'm standing behind a case, and here comes security coming out with their walkie-talkies. They go, you had a breach on the 21st floor. And long story short, they escort me down and are making fun of me with the camera. They're telling me to stand back and look at the camera. I get onto the street, and I thought, well, let me play Santa. And I walk down New York playing Santa in the middle of July, and with a lot of pictures.
That's
and
that is a great story. We need a photo of that so we can place it in this video or something.
yeah.
But
if you can't find one, Chuck, I'll draw it. I remember the photo.
Yeah.
So, Chuck, I have a question for you. What is the strategy that you guys use to sell an idea for a new client?
Great question. And sizzle, which is, we just gave you two examples of, for us, because we had to kind of cut through all the clutter. We were a small company, and everything counted, and so I think probably the biggest thing we could show is how do you show the passion of the studio, meaning the culture, which is really the culture and the fabric of who we are, and do it in an authentic way, and not there were a lot of studios that are very rigid, or we didn't want to be corporate. You have to have a corporate structure and corporate infrastructure and all that. But one of the things we've tried hard over the years is to have our culture at the center of what we do and represent that when we're talking to clients in everything, from how we work with them, how we integrate with them. But I would say that the one thing that's probably our secret sauce has been sizzle, the extra things that we do, and when we present a proposal to a client, or because at the end of the day, again, that certainly registers with them as something that is important. That we're not going to, if we're over delivering on how we're selling or presenting ourselves, we're probably going to do that in the project itself too.
You can't to add to what Chuck was saying is like, over time, I guess it can get be seen as laborious to always provide sizzle along with a presentation, but that is our secret sauce, and we often, more than win, lose jobs, lose opportunities. It's the nature, I think, of anybody's business. Is like I said, you lose 9 out of 10 opportunities, but you still can't give up on and change the way you present yourself, because that's what makes you, I say the studio, it makes the studio what the studio is. And so over time, we sometimes often strayed and forgot what it was that made us us, and got too busy and bogged down with because it's a drain. It's just exhausting to constantly be competing in the world for this kind of work. But every time we've won an opportunity, it was because we went the extra mile and did the most unique thing that really set ourselves apart, and did the memorable thing. Even though with the Santa thing, for example, we didn't win that opportunity. It didn't happen. It doesn't mean it won't, though. It could still come back, and it's fun to be able to talk about something that's 20 years old. But it was one of the major milestones for growth, and how we realized it does make an impression, because that relationship, Chuck, that you built with your Santa experience came back many years later.
It did, yeah. It's a love using a movie reference. It's kind of like a Peter Pan moment, which is we've had our ups and downs in this area, even, which is like as a kid, when we're your young studio. I mean, we were all, and then when you kind of grow up, and we grew to, at peak we had 500 people. We had 500 people last year between our studios. And so you grow up and forget what it is to be a kid, And so Brandon and I have been really, over the past year or so, just going, we got to be the kid again. Where's Peter Pan? And learn how to fly. I know those are cheesy little analogies, but at the end of the day, you can mix that. You can be a large studio and still have that as your essence. So
that's great.
Yes.
Yeah, it's super important. Now, next question is for you, Brandon, and this question actually divides in 3 sections. So the first part, how often do you sketch? Then the second part, have you thought on having a book with all your work or biography? Because, man, I mean, you have a lot of stuff. You really deserve a book with your story and with your artwork, etc. I will be like more than happy to buy it and get it and have it as a reference. And the third one, please tell us about the traveling man in Deep Ellum here in Dallas, because not a lot of people know, but the traveling man is an amazing sculpture. I would consider it as an icon.
It is
on Deep Ellum, and not a lot of people know this, but Brandon, the guy that is right there, sculpted. So that's the question. Those are the 3 questions.
Okay. Number one, yes, I sketch. I don't do it as often as I should, but I did a bunch yesterday and the day before, and unfortunately, you know, as you grow in your career, sometimes you end up steering more into managerial roles. Not that I do that, but I think it's producing content sometimes requires other things besides just drawing. And I consider myself more of a conductor in conducting art.
Okay.
And yes, it's important to show people what your vision is, and sometimes the best way to do it is with the drawing. And that's constantly a part of what we do. But then over time, if you're going to conduct, you got to realize so-and-so needs to be doing the trumpet solo, and so-and-so over here needs to be doing that other part of the orchestra. And so then it's your job to then pull the best out of people. And then that's what that's how I found myself into more of a creative and then a director role, is to identify what people are really great at and then help them be the best that they can be and still work together to harmonize. And so drawing is so important, and I'm very fortunate to have had that as a skill set of mine, because it was the only thing that I was good at. I wasn't good at sports, and I certainly wasn't good at math. And so I fortunately was able to have family that kept me on that path, and eventually found a career that could use that skill. Very lucky in that regard. So yes, I do sketch. And your second question was, what was it? I can't remember.
Book.
The book.
Biography of your work.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's a huge compliment to say that. And I would love to compile not only my drawings, but all the art that has gone into making the career that Chuck and I have found, this trajectory we have found ourselves on over all these years. We've talked at length over the last few years of how important I think it is for us to establish the milestones and the journey we've been on. And probably the best way to do that would be to put it into a physical book. We would love to do that. I think we have probably the most unique, unknown story in the world of animation that has been going along as sort of almost like a Forrest Gump through the entire rebirth and golden age of CG animation history. We've been sort of intertwined in all of that, but also we have been the bad news bears of all of that too. We have been the underdogs the whole time. And I think these underdog stories are sometimes the more compelling ones because they're the most relatable. And I think that's really important, Chuck, that you mentioned it earlier, is that we're talking about all of the difficulties we've run into over the years trying to dare to be mavericks and different in this universe of creating animated stories. So yes, we would love to be able to illustrate the story of our past 26 plus years of trying to do this. And third, the Traveling Man, you talked about the sculpture that's in Deep Ellum. Yes. It's a sculpture series. So interesting. We were residents and had our offices in Deep Ellum for many years. We recently just moved. And there was a really beautiful tunnel that went under a railroad track in Deep Ellum that had all these beautiful murals on it. And the Dart rail system had to tear it down. And it was sad, but they came up with this contest to say, hey, if you're an artist in residence in Deep Ellum, we invite you to present what you would do as a sculpture in pairing with our new train station we're going to build. And so I gathered the entire art department together at Real Effects and said, hey guys, I'm going to order some pizza, let's meet in conference room 1, and let's just jam for an hour and think about what would be really cool as a sculptural installation in Deep Ellum. And so the entire team just threw around a bunch of ideas, and we all collectively decided it would be cool to have a giant robot sculpture in Deep Ellum. And then I ran with that, right? And then I said, well, first off, we're an animation studio. We have no business making giant metal sculptures, but we want to make a giant metal robot in Deep Ellum. And then I knew that it needed a narrative, and so we worked hard at trying to figure out what the true narrative was behind this sculpture, and then also wanted to create an awakening of sorts, a series of them to make it appear as though there were more than just one. And so we needed to also have somebody on the team that could validate the actual construction aspect of it, and that's where we reached out to a friend of ours who we'd been working with over the past few years doing an award for us. We started this Tex Avery Animation Award many years ago.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to go off on a tangent now. So there is this old Dallas high school that's right off McKinney Avenue, and it was the original high school of Dallas. And there's a library on the second floor of the original schoolhouse building. And in that library, there's a fireplace. It's that old of a high school building. It has a little fireplace in this library. But right to the right of the mantle is this little framed image of a guy, Fred Avery, and his nickname was Tex. He went to that high school and had graduated in the early, the 1918, I can't remember the exact year that he graduated high school from there. But he's the guy who invented the phrase, "What's up, Doc?" Bugs Bunny, all of our Looney Tune characters that are now going to hit
Bugs
the screen
Bunny from
again.
Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. Tex Avery invented all of this, and he went to this high school, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this history, and we have an animation studio here. We need to tell the world about how he's from here and get people excited about this. So at that time, the Deep Ellum Film Festival had turned into the AFI Dallas International Film Festival, and they were asking for our involvement, and we said, hey, how about we bring this award to the festival, but we call it the Tex Avery Animation Award. So I was able to track down and find his daughter, got the family to embrace the idea of having this award, and then we were like, well, who do we give it to first? And then we started to go down the list. We started with Brad Bird, and then Henry Selick, and then Pete Docter. It just kept, the list goes on for the people we've brought to the Metroplex to learn from. It was a great excuse personally, but also for all of our employees to know that it's a learning experience for us to be able to have that audience with those who live and work in the industry on the East and West Coast. So out of that knowledge about the history of the studio, we in the need to create an award about this person who really formed this industry, we needed an award. And so we thought, well, his most popular cartoon is this wolf. And what if we made that into an Academy Award-looking trophy? And so I reached out to Brad Oldham, who works in metal, and he took one of our sculpts and cast it into a metal statuette, which we've now made multiples of that we've given out to all these different people. But so that's where the relationship with Brad started, Brad Oldham, and then that's why we thought of Brad to reach in and have him be a part of the pitch for the Traveling Man series. Little known fact, that whole thing could have gone south. The day that the submission was due, we literally were running into the mailroom at DART to hand over the package, and it was 10 minutes before closing time, and there was no one at the mailroom station's window. It was vacant, but the window was open. And my car was idling out on the road about to get a ticket. And so then I'm crestfallen, and I'm like, there's nobody there. And then I go back, after like scratching my head trying to figure out what to do, and then the thing had been closed. Like someone was away and then it closed it. So I begged that we could submit it Monday to a person the following Monday, and fortunately for us, they accepted it at 48 hours late. And so we were able to be considered. We eventually won the account and got to do that series. And the last thing I'll say about this is that, as absurd as it is for an animation studio to do a series of sculptures, we care greatly about the city, we care greatly about where we're from, and that's what makes us unique. And number two, we had a vision, which was to create a landmark in an area where there was nothing. We said we would love to make something where people would want to have their photo taken with it, that would be on Monday Night Football when they're going to a commercial break. It would be that little image that the Geico logo would float over or something. And sure enough, all of that has come true. The day we opened and unveiled these sculptures, there was a bride and groom having their photo shoot in front of the series. Then, a few weeks later, there it was on Monday Night Football. And then over the years, it's now on the sides of beer cans and skateboards and T-shirts and hats. It's all over the place. And we are so... it's so rewarding to see that you have a vision for something, and then people embrace it, and it becomes an icon. That was the wish, was that it would be as iconic as the Pegasus, and it has become that.
Yeah, no, and congratulations, kudos for that, because also it's super strong. Believe me, ladies and gentlemen, because Texas weather, I mean, is crazy, and it has been there for a while. Like
an interesting fact about the roots of this robot is that it has to go just as far deep as it is above ground. I actually have video of when we drilled the hole and put the base in, and it had to go down 60 feet to be able to withstand wind shear and all these other needs for sculpture.
Tornadoes, etc.
Yeah.
I think that's for sure. I'm gonna just place images, video, photos here.
Okay.
The word inclusion has become something that it's on the mouth of everybody. It's inclusion here, inclusion there. It's a factor that now has been used from a lot of companies in terms of hiring people. How much weight did you give when you select candidates?
Okay, so this is it's a tricky topic, but here's what I'll start with. Fortunately for our studio, our inclusion is a big part of our profile. It's in our DNA, and whether it's a gender inclusion or or race or whatever, you kind of have to go into everything colorblind. And I'll say this is that the most important factor is talent, personality, passion, creativity, work ethic, and attitude, right? And that filters a lot of people. So at the end of the day, that's what's important. And I'll say attitude is a big part of that. Fortunately for us, when we cast our net, we cast it so that inclusion is part of that. We're trying not to be narrow. I'll be very careful here. In certain parts of the industry, it can be old white guys, and that's not what we are. In fact, in Montreal, I believe we were at 35 to 40% female at last count, or at least last year, and our recruits and talent were representing 30 plus countries from around the world. And so underneath all of that is the idea that what's important isn't a narrow perspective on what we do. So widening the net means the perspectives from other countries, other cultures, from you being a male, you being a female, are you African American? What is that culture? And like anything that's good, let's take food. When the fusion of that happens in the world of art, that's when the magic happens. And so, I would say this, we're still working hard at it. We have our own goals. And the other area I would say is important. It isn't just inclusion as far as, let's say, having, being sensitive to that and having them, and being not only sensitive to that, but being cognizant and taking action, but also for opportunities for advancement, meaning giving a voice at the table that often in maybe, larger studios or companies, whatever that, sometimes that's not the case. And so we were part, we belong to Women in Animation. We're not trying to pat ourselves on the back for that, but we were in some panels a few years ago at Annecy talking about this topic, and it was an interesting one because all the panelists were supposed to come and talk about how their company profile looked, and I was the only one that came with percentages. I asked our CFO, I'm going, how are we doing? We gotta, and that's part of it. It's like at a leadership level, you can't stick your head in the sand, and you got to pop up and say, how are we doing? And if it's not representation, if it's not being represented well, why? Are we recruiting from the right areas? Are we, So, yeah, it's a big topic, and it's a hot one. But at the end of the day, when we look at inclusion, it's also rooted in finding the talent and that creativity and the passion that goes along with it, which is super important.
That and the culture of the people.
And the culture, culture's massive. It's interesting. Speaking of culture, I'll use food as an analogy. You can look at me and think, "Yeah, this guy likes food," but New Orleans, if you think about the food and also the music, because Brandon was talking about Traveling Man, and also part of the story that they came up with is he looked at the history of what's Deep Ellum, and it had a massive blues, music roots, and those musicians like Blind Lemon and all those guys, a lot of them didn't come from Dallas; they came from New Orleans, and so out of disasters, out of hurricanes. Restaurants and musicians and artists that were in New Orleans would leave. Well, when that would happen, and a lot of them would stay. So what happens is that culture and that background is then infused into the local, industry of music and of food, and in our case, of the arts. So who benefits? Everybody. I mean. Exactly. New Orleans will always grow, and but I think that's the kind of the way we look at it. It's how do we look at how the profile of our company, and be sure that the diversity comes from an idea of fusion of all these great flavors that work together.
I also want to just interject and just say that the industry for the longest time was just a boys' club, and even when I went to art school. The majority of those who are interested in animation were boys. And that changed, and has drastically changed, and is now completely outnumbered by all kinds of genders and races. It is way more diverse across the spectrum. And that's because the animation as a medium is now a part of every genre. And that there's a hunger for it on every level, even more so now with COVID. The way that we are able to produce content still, even during a pandemic, makes us even in a higher demand. And the thing is, we're also now realizing we're getting sick of the same stories. They're all coming from the same sort of perspective, and we need more authentic narratives, and that will come through the different kinds of people that inhabit this planet, not just the white dudes that are just had been around for a while. And so there needs to be more authentic narrative storytelling in the world, and that's going to come through an openness and an inclusion of everyone. And so we're excited to continue to play our part and be proactive in that space. It's very important that at the end of the day, we're bringing stories to the table created by people from all walks of life. Yep. And that's where something original is going to happen. That's where something unique is going to happen. That's not going to feel like a story we've heard before.
Amazing. Yep. Love it. Thank you guys for that answer. And this question is for you, Brandon. You're going to like this one because it has to do with the Peter Pan moment on your life. This is actually a moment that marked you as a creative when you were a kid. What was that moment that sparked you and you were like, okay, this is what I want to do?
Well, it's kind of crazy because Chuck and I were together in the same space just the other day. His daughter was in a play, a musical, children's version of Les Mis, and she's an amazing singer and actress. And we were standing outside during intermission, and I was telling Chuck, this used to be an old movie theater. This is actually where I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark for the first time when I was like 7 years old with my dad. And I remember walking out into this parking lot at night. It was nighttime at that moment. And I remember telling my dad, I know what I want to do for the rest of my life. And he's like, an archaeologist? And I said, no, I know that people make that movie. I know that people made that. I want to do that too. Mm-hmm. And so he saw that in me at that age, and that same weekend we went and found a Super 8 camera at a used camera store down the street. And he put that in my hand, he showed me how to load the film, and I was off to the races. And have been trying to tell stories with moving pictures for the rest of my life since that moment. That was definitely, I guess, that moment that you're talking about. And it's so relevant because we were just literally standing on my personal hallowed ground for that moment when it happened. And so that's why I immediately thought of that when you said it, because we were literally just standing there last weekend.
Yep.
Awesome. And part of that movie also inspired Lalo and I to create this podcast. The name is thanks to that movie.
I know.
Yeah.
Tomb rating.
That's funny.
You know.
Yep.
But so we are explorers. So now we explore gems of people and bring them here. So yeah.
So great.
This question is for you, Chuck. There is a need to evolve and create the most unique animated movie with tons of realistic and modern special effects, different stories, but sometimes there are so many things and techniques to learn from old movies, the old school, the 80s, 70s, and 20s. How do movies from the past inspire you as an studio?
Well, I'll leap right off of what Brandon just brought up, which is Raiders of the Lost Ark. You know, honestly, I think that what we've been thinking about, especially lately, is when you are talking about an animated movie. Okay, for instance, often you'll hear, "Hey, we want to do this animated movie," and it's kind of a cross between this animated movie and this animated movie. That's pretty narrow. Like that's kind of a narrow, you know. So we like the idea of talking about live action movies, you know, the classics, the things or filmmakers that we love, you know, like Coen Brothers and Raising Arizona, or, you know, and how great and cinematic that is, or the Spielberg movies like Brandon just mentioned, or, you know, for personal silly, you know, for silliness and wonkiness, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, or, you know, if it's a more emotional journey, it's like, you know, Stand By Me or The Goonies. You know, if you look at all those movies, they're live action movies. They're things that have, you know, impressed us and formed who we are as people, you know, since we were kids. You know, Brandon had his lightning bolt moment with Raiders of the Lost Ark in that movie theater. And so, you know, for us, I think that's what shapes us, is how do you take these, you know, classic and intimate portrayals from filmmakers of the past, not out of the animation. That's like you know, why go to the same gene pool? You know, let's step outside of that and think about the influences that can come out of that, and how does that play? What is the influence of Goonies and how incredible that was to, you know, for every kid to watch Goonies and go, God, I wish I was there. How does that influence an animated movie? Or how does Stand By Me feel on that journey of you know, the scariness of those kids going down the railroad track, or the craziness and of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang? You know, I think that's how, you know, for us, I think that's the thing. Whenever we start to think about it in those terms, and get out of the narrow focus of saying, hey, we want it to look like the Spideyverse. Incredible movie. We know the filmmaker really well. The filmmaker, one of the directors, directed another movie called Rise of the Guardians. That's another story, which actually started with Brandon and me and William Joyce way back as something else before it was sold there. But that's it. It's like source your materials from something outside of the same gene pool as your influences. I think that's would be my answer. I don't know, Brandon, if you...
Yeah, to add to what you're saying, Chuck, I think we as artists or creatives, we're constantly consuming content. And each thing that we consume, whether it's even staring at wallpaper, it's content of some kind that we're consuming, and it's an ingredient into the story that we all end up making.
Or if it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, you would be licking the wallpaper.
Licking the wallpaper.
Right?
No, but seriously, anything can inspire you, whether it's a wildflower on the side of the road, wallpaper, or inspiration come from anywhere, but these are all ingredients that you throw into that pot that you stir up, and you hopefully tell a story that's got a unique taste to it, and that's what makes it special, and it's what makes it you, is because you're pulling all those influences together. And so whenever we're telling stories, we like to identify what the ingredients are, and it's nothing to be something you should shy away from. You should be really blatant about it. You should talk about how, we're inspired by Fritz Lang, or we're inspired by Capra, in the way that his characters are so authentic and genuine and underdog, or we're inspired by the Spielberg, staying on the Spielberg thread for a moment. And maybe it's not just the film, but it was the technique and how the film was made, or the accidents that happen. It's inspired. We get inspired by the fact that the shark robot broke, and that it became a better film because of it, because the shark is not seen, and it makes it more terrifying. And so therefore we like to identify things that have happened in the past with other things, other stories, and learn from them. It's so important. And it's the way all of us artists work, is that we continue to build off of each other's stories and each other's works. Whether you're a painter or a musician, what you put out into the world is going to seed and inspire the next work of art. And we're all building on top of it together, collectively.
Amazing. Love it. And
thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And the last question, this is for you, Brandon. What would be your legacy to this planet?
That's a big one.
Well, it's funny, you're talking about the traveling man, and it's been sort of a joke that it's going to be that thing on the beach after all the planet has been taken over by the apes.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
It's going to be the little smiling guy with his little bird on his arm.
Halfway in the sand.
Halfway in the sand. That's the legacy.
Awesome.
Yeah. No, I think all that you can hope for as a storyteller is that your story is heard, and whether it meets the ears of one person and inspires them, or more than that, if you're fortunate. Either way, you're fortunate to get your story out and to be able to have an audience, even if it's with one person.
Of course.
The film that I worked on back in 2009 to 2012, the Fantastic Flying Books, was an homage to all storytelling, and it was about how everybody's story matters. And so it's important that you share it, because that helps other people cope with their own problems that they're dealing with, and to realize that they're not alone. And we all have an amazing story to tell. It's just sometimes hard to identify it, and it's sometimes hard to articulate, and it sometimes takes another person's story to get you off your butt to go try to articulate it.
Amazing.
So that's what I hope, is that whatever it is that we end up making together, Chuck, whether it was something we did a long time ago, or if it's something we have yet to do in the near future, it will find an audience, and it will inspire others.
No doubt.
Totally.
Hopefully it's another 27 years of doing it.
It will for sure. So Brandon and Chuck, any message that you want to share to the audience?
I'll start. Listen, I think why we try to tell the story of our origins is the most important part of our studio formation, because we had nothing. We had duct tape and spit and blood, sweat, and tears, and if we can do it, anybody can do it. I don't care if it's something small or big, whatever that is. As Brandon said, you just got to take that step and go for it and be persistent. I mean, we were traveling to Los Angeles every few weeks, knocking on doors, and rough. It was rough in the beginning, but we found, out of all the doors we knocked, we found several relationships that are massive, heads of studios that gave us shots and opportunities simply because they saw something in us, So we had to move a lot of dirt, but we'd find this gold nugget, and then we'd protect it and not abuse it and use it. So you just have to grind it. But if you don't like it, if this isn't your passion, go do something that you love instead. But if this is it, it's a great business and it's a great world to be in. So.
Awesome.
I'll just add to that yes, there's no denying that I personally was able to find what I loved and was able to continue to do what I loved throughout my career from being a kid to now. And but that is the one thing that I know is really hard and is hard to comprehend for a lot of people, is to do what they love. And it can be very scary, and there's a lot of risk involved. But you should never regret not having tried. And so, my message out there is do that thing that you feel like you need to do, that you love. You have to find that thing that you're passionate about, and you know what it is. It's telling you, it's haunting you, and you just need to embrace it. But it can be really scary, and it can mess things up too if it goes south. But you won't regret having not tried. And so that's all I gotta say is just to go for it, follow your passions, and do what you love.
Yeah. Go find your yellow Volkswagen.
Exactly. Awesome. And you want to share your social media links, website, and all, Chuck and Brandon?
Sure.
Sure. It's the website's realeffects.com. It's REELFX.com. Brandon, you want to?
Yeah, I'll plug a few things. So our sister company, FlightSchoolStudios.com. We have obviously all channels on media and social media to tap into. And personally, I'm excited for the game, which releases on the 1st of June.
Cool.
Called Stonefly, our next video game. And tonight is the final episode of the animated series that we created for Funny or Die and Paramount Plus, called No Activity. It was made during the pandemic, and tonight the last episode drops, so that's worth plugging. It's an amazing show that I did not know existed. That was live action that got turned into animation because of COVID, and we were lucky enough to be asked to be the ones to animate it. And I think it's the funniest thing on TV that no one's watching. I hope some of you guys find it and check it out.
For sure.
And you can follow me on Instagram.
Obviously.
Flight School Brandon, and then on Twitter, Brandon Bot.
Yep. We'll place all the websites here so you can see it, and also on the YouTube channel and on Spotify. That way you can click and go and get wild, because it's a beauty.
That'd be great. There's a little bit of a difference of age with me and Brandon. And you can tell because all I did was do the website for that's it. And Brandon has everything, and I'm over here going, I don't even remember my Instagram.
That's great, guys. That's great. Thank you so much for your time. Because
thank you for inviting us to do this.
Yeah,
we've been as Brandon said earlier, we've been talking about doing this for a long time, and this will help set us into motion to,
of course,
tell these stories.
You've gotten the momentum started.
This is the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more stories behind.
No, I bet we should do part 2 of this or something.
So, let's have a beer and
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
always
one of these days. But thank you so much, guys. Thank you for all the audience out there. Hope you like it, and have a good one. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye bye.
Thanks. See you later.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.